For that. Okay, let me share my screen. And I will get my presentation up and going here. Okay, hopefully you can see the whole screen with nothing else.
Yes.
I'm excited to be here, and I'm going to talk about the beginning steps to finding your Chinese ancestors. I teach at Brigham Young University, and I've been teaching for about 15 years now. And it seems like every semester I have a handful of students that have Asian ancestry, and they feel like there's nothing they can do to find their ancestral roots. And so I was motivated to learn this aspect of family history, and it's very different than Western family history. So let's jump in and get started. Why do we want to know about our families? Well, it helps us to make connections. We often have a yearning to belong. And when we know who our families are and a little bit about them or a lot about them, it helps us to understand them and feel this bond with them. Recent studies have actually shown that knowing about your personal family history, and this is specific to the living relatives, actually helps children to become more resilient in all kinds of difficult situations. And so there's a motivation to get to know more about your families. It also increases your self-worth. I have always loved finding out about my family and learning how to help others find their families. And this is just a passion of mine, and I hope that I can pass that on to you a little bit. Okay, obstacles. Yes, there are obstacles in finding your Chinese ancestry. One of the first obstacles that many people face right up front is the language. Maybe they feel like they don't know how to speak or understand relatives that speak in Chinese, or even read the characters. That's a big hurdle, but I want you to know that it is possible to actually do family history without knowing that. You may need to find a friend to help you. However, it is possible to move forward on that. Maybe you don't know where the family is from in China, and maybe you don't know any family that's there. Nobody talks about the Chinese side of the family. Maybe you don't even know your Chinese family name character, which that is going to be an important thing as we move forward. So even if you're in this position where you don't know these things and you don't have access to them, you still can begin. And we always begin with ourselves, identifying what we know and writing that down or organizing it in some way. And then we start asking questions to our families. We ask our living relatives what they know about our Chinese side of the family. It's especially important that you ask questions of the elders in the family. They know many things, and you need to ask those questions before they pass on. Now, as you're collecting this information, organize it and preserve it. Don't write on a napkin, and don't write on a store receipt, because those things are going to be lost. This is information that you may not be able to collect at another time. So start now and make it electronic, or if you do write on paper, make sure that you scan it and then share it with other families so that you can begin building on the information that you've collected. Okay, to really get into finding your Chinese ancestors, there are two pieces of information that are must-haves. And the first is you need to identify your surname character. Now, when you're in the West, your surname is spelled out in Romanized letters, but that surname does not easily translate to a character. For example, if your last name is Li, and that's your family name, there are possibly 8 different Li characters that could be. So if you can identify which lead character is yours, that's going to help you move forward in your research. The next piece of information that's very vital is to find the ancestral village name. This is the location where your immigrant ancestor came from. That's their ancestral home. And if you have that name, go ahead and record it somewhere. Even the characters for that name. Write it out in what it sounds like, and you may be able to identify it later. But those are the two pieces of information that you need to know in order to begin searching for your clan genealogy book, otherwise called a Jiāpǔ. If you are lucky enough to already have a Jiāpǔ in your possession, this would be a book filled with Chinese characters. You probably need some help interpreting it, or interpreting the genealogical tables and charts. So if you have that already, that's great. But if you don't have it, you need these other two pieces of information. Even if you have your clan genealogy, I would suggest that it would be very worthwhile to identify your ancestral name and then make a plan to go visit it sometime. There's a lot to be gained by visiting the ancestral village. Okay, as you're talking to relatives, especially your elders, I have a list of some questions that would be helpful to ask. Ideally, when you are collecting background history, using open-ended questions is really helpful to get this at the stories. However, many of the questions I've posted here are not open-ended questions. These are questions about specific things that's going to help you. So for example, where is the ancestral home located? Again, this is getting back to the ancestral village. What's the nearest market town or city? Many of these Chinese ancestral villages are very small, and you might have many, but then there's one big market town or city nearby. And so if you can identify and narrow down your search to even that city where the village is near, you can get out a map and start looking from there. Ask, where is the Ancestral Hall? Now, on my first slide, and I'm actually going to go back and show you. Yeah. On my first slide, this right here in the corner, this is inside an Ancestral Hall. These are, they probably officially call them spirit tablets, but each of these tablets represents a person, an ancestor. And on that tablet is contained a name and then some data about that person. And this is what you want to get access to. Often it's in this location where the family genealogy is kept. So if you can identify the Ancestral Hall, here's another one where the family that has the same last name comes to, you might say worship, but it's more of a reverence and remember their ancestors. And they keep these tablets available so that you can remember and reflect upon them. Okay, and then the last question on this slide is, where are ancestors buried? Is there a family cemetery? There often is a family cemetery outside of the village somewhere where the family is buried. And oftentimes they have good tombstones or headstones, but they're a little different than what we would be used to. And so this would be an important location as well. Other questions, do we have genealogy? This is a page of a genealogy where if you are a genealogist, you probably can see that it's showing descendants. So we have an ancestor who had a child, and this child had a child, and this child had a child, and then this person had 2 children. And then this child actually had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And it's showing a descendancy here. And what this shows are also generations. So you have 1 generation, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 generations on this particular page. Now, not all genealogy Jiāpūs are organized in this format. There are several formats that can be organized, but this one is a visual one that may help you recognize how this particular one is laid out. Okay, if your family knows that they have a Jiāpū or a Zipu is more like a family register. A Jiāpū is a clan register where the family that has the same last name that lives in the village uses, where a Zipu is on a smaller version, smaller scale, but it's definitely related. In addition, you may be familiar with family names. And this goes beyond the family surname character, but often families use a generational poem. And this generational poem is used then to name the children of each generation. A generational poem often contains maybe 20 to 40 characters. And it is a poem that is written by one of the ancestors. And the poem includes characteristics that they want or aspire to in the family. Then each character is used to name children of different generations. So the first character in the poem would be used for the first generation of descendants following the time that poem was written. And that character would be used often as a middle name character. And then the second character would go to the children of that first generation, so the second generation. You can see that even not only siblings, but cousins across a generation can be identified with that generational character in the poem, from the poem. Now, often use that character. Females may use a different one. Most of the Jiāpū, as we see here, will record men. They don't often record daughters. I have seen some that do record daughters, but it's more common that it's a patrilineal record. And they do record the family name of wives. Okay, so this is a question you can ask. Some of you may even have a generational name, but you didn't know where it came from. Okay, more questions. Who was the first person in our family that came from China or that left China? About when did this person immigrate to the US or to Canada? And where did he arrive? These are important questions that may allow you to get into other records that can help you then identify these things that we wanted to know from the beginning, the family surname character and the ancestral village. Has our family been associated with a benevolent society? A benevolent society was important to immigrants as they came to the US. Usually these benevolent societies were associated with a surname. And so all the Lees or all the Wangs would have, the Wangs would have a different society. The Lees would have a society. But this was kind of a support system for immigrants coming over. And so typically when an immigrant came or arrived to the US or Canada, they would contact their family benevolent association. And the benevolent association could help them, direct them towards work or help them with other things. Modern day, these societies do other things, and we'll look at that in a little bit later. Okay, other questions to ask. Do we have any letters or photos? Do we have any documents? Are there documents with the Chinese characters on them? Sometimes there are wedding announcements and month-old baby invitations and red banners. There's all kinds of memorabilia or paper documents that you might find. Don't throw them away if they have Chinese writing on, especially. Keep those, and then we can find some help in translating and extracting the key information that's needed. Okay, personal questions. And I would suggest, if you can, record this with a digital recorder or video, if your relative allows that, because you may have to repeat it to get some of this information down. Okay, what is your full name? Now, many Chinese have more than one name, meaning more than the name that they use in public. They may have some alternate names. So ask for all of those names. Ask them when they were born. Now, if you have a recent immigrant from China, they may not give you a Western date when they were born. And so you may need to ask, in what zodiac year were you born? And then you can calculate that down. Or maybe they'll give you that rather than a date. Their calendars are often by lunar dates, and so they're a little different than what the West uses. What are the names of your parents? When and where were they born? What are the names of your siblings? When and where were they born? And the same for the grandparents. When and where were they born? And again, as you're collecting that information, ask for the alternate names. Now you can ask for family memories and stories. What do you remember about our family? Can you tell us any family stories or traditions? The Mid-Autumn Festival, New Year's, what did you typically do? How was it celebrated? What is the story of our immigrant ancestor? Okay, family records, as we said, there are a whole bunch of things. One of the things we didn't include in my last list were photos. Photos will be very helpful. Even if you don't know who is in it right now, as you work with others with the same family name and in the same location, you might be able to figure out those things. I have seen so many Chinese Americans as they make connections, and someone knows some people in the photo, but another distant relative knows who others are. So make sure you keep those photos. Letters, obituaries, identification certificates, return certificates, and certificate of residence. These actually have to do with immigration. Keep wedding announcements, anything in Chinese. Receipts. Another clue would be gravestones or tombstones with Chinese characters. Often on tombstones, they will include the family name character and the ancestral village name. So that if you have a tombstone with Chinese characters, that will be very helpful to you. And then family associations, and these are often the benevolent societies with the family surname. Okay, let's talk a little bit about Chinese names. So in the West, we have a first name, a middle name, and a last name. The last name is our surname or family name. Well, in the East, it's not that way. The family name comes first. And in Chinese, that's typically a one-character family name. However, there are a few two-character family names. So just be aware that sometimes they can be two. But that's the thing that comes first. So the very first, and in their mind, the most important thing is the family. And so that would come first, followed by personal names. Now, it is possible to have a one-character personal name, but more often there are two characters. And often one of the characters will be that generational name, especially in a boy's name. Another naming convention is that women never change their surname. They maintain, they maintain their birth surname for once they're married. And their surname followed by she tells you that this woman is from the family of she and then Zhang, whatever the family's character is. So it tells you what family she comes from. And as I mentioned earlier, there can be multiple names. So ask for different names. They're often given a milk name or a childhood name. And then when they have reached adulthood or an achievement, they might be given an achievement like a marriage even. They might be given an adult name, which is different from the milk name. And then later, they might be given another title. So make sure to ask for any names that this person might have been known by. If you know those names, then you can find them in the records. Okay, Chinese dates. Again, we talked about gathering information about birth dates. Death dates are also important. Well, when we format them in the way the Chinese do, again, think about the most important thing first. And that's often the biggest thing. And in this case, it's the year. The year is the largest thing. And so that comes first, followed by the month, and then the day. And as we said, often the Chinese use the lunar calendar. So the dates will be a little different or a lot different than what we're used to. So there are websites and ways to calculate what the Western date would be. They also are very familiar with what year of the zodiac they were born in. And it is a 12-year cycle, and each year has an animal. And so if I said I was born in the year of the rabbit, they could automatically calculate what year I was born because they're so familiar with that. But if you're having a hard time coming up with a year, maybe asking somebody what zodiac year they were born in could help you come up with the right year. Okay, places. In China, again, we go from the largest to the smallest. So even when they write addresses, so we would begin with the country, and the country would be China. And then with the province, which would be the equivalent of a state in our case, a county, a city, and then a village. So it's important to know this with the dates and places and the names, because if you're talking to somebody, they may be giving you the information in this order. Okay, so I got this little chart off the internet, and I put a link down there, but there are many of these. It's really important to understand who you are in relation to your relatives. And I love how the Chinese have very specific, unique names for everyone. In the West, we say, I have 3 siblings, and this is my sister, and this is my brother, and this is my other sister. Well, in China, they tell you, this is my older sister, this is my younger brother, and then this is my younger sister. And it's very specific. And so when a relative is talking to you, they may mention a name in Chinese that is referring to a relationship. And so as we look on this chart, we are in the first position here. And so as we talk about our older sister, she's our Jie, and here's her husband, and this is how the relative may talk about. Here's our Mei, and here's our Mei's husband, Meifu. Here we have a younger brother's wife, and so forth. Okay, so what this is probably more relevant to you with is talking about grandparents. This is not just grandmother and grandfather. Each of the grandparents have a specific name. So here we have Nai. This is your paternal grandmother. Ye is your paternal grandfather. Waipo is your maternal grandmother, and Waigong is your paternal grandfather. So as you're talking to a relative, if they are referring to these Chinese titles or names, you need a chart similar to this to be able to decipher who it is they're talking about. So there are many of these on the internet, but I just thought this little sample might be helpful to you. Okay, organize your information. These are some of the pictures I actually took when I was in China. And we gathered together with family members and asked questions. And as you look closely, you can see here that we're actually diagramming charts to try to figure out how a certain person is connected to another person. Here we have Chinese characters written out as we're identifying names. And I found it very interesting. So imagine this, we're in a very rural village. And this man is trying to write out his information about him, his wife, and his children. He's a widower and his wife had passed away. And he's approaching the interpreter, who is this woman. Okay, so he's trying to verify characters. He asked the interpreter if this is the correct way to write the character that he's wanting. So in the village, he might be less educated or less using some of the characters less often, less familiar. And so I just found it interesting that even with regard to their own family names, he was asking the interpreter's help. But here we can see the diagrams. So as you collect this information, organize it, and then share it with other family members. So if something happens to your copy, there's another copy available. We really want to make sure that this information is preserved, especially as you're talking to those elders in the family. Okay, so now let's jump back to China. It's really helpful to understand a little bit of Chinese history, what was going on in China, and if you can identify what time frame your immigrant ancestor came to the US, they'll give you an idea of what was going on then, and give you an idea of what records you can look for them in the US. So as we look at this time frame from 1644 to 1900, we had dynasties and emperors, and the emperor changed throughout the years. But then there was a lot of political turmoil probably beginning before 1911. But from 1911 to 1949, we have the Republic of China and the Chinese Communist Party, and lots of things going on within China. We had Japan invaded China. Anyway, within China itself, there was a lot of turmoil. Then from 1949 to present, there was a little more stability, a little more. And again, depending on the time frame they left, it will give you, and what was going on, you can see why they might have left. And then looking for that time frame within the US, it will help us direct to certain records where you can find them. So I talked with a professor when I was in China, Celia Tan, and her expertise was probably historic architecture. However, she had a love of and a fascination for the overseas Chinese. And so she was very involved in obtaining records and making collections available about the overseas Chinese. And she created this little map. And so here we have, this is the southern China, Hong Kong, Macau, and Kaiping, Toisan, if you know the dialect. So during the time that I showed you in the history of China, about mid-1800s for 100 years until about 1950 to 70, the wave of immigration from China to the West landed in these locations. So we had a lot of Chinese that came to Canada. We had a lot of Chinese that came to the US. Australia, again, was a large one. And then we had some groups that went to Central America. So it's very common to find Chinese ancestry in these locations. More modernly, okay, and what's important about this is most of these people that left China during that 100-year time or more came from about 4 counties in Guangdong. Actually, probably 85% came from there, and then we have some more that came from Fujian province, which is a neighboring county and province. So you can see, even if we don't know exactly where our ancestors came from, we can probably, if we know the time frame, we can probably narrow it down to the southern part of China, and then start researching and digging down from there. So, and one other point that was pointed out to me the other day is this was not the earliest immigration from China. The earliest immigration from China actually went east and among the countries to the east. But this was, I'm showing you specific to the West here. Okay, so why did they come? Why did the Chinese come west? One of the big reasons, again, thinking about the political turmoil within the country, one of the big reasons they came west was to find work and earn money. And initially it was men that came west. And I was in one of the museums in China, and I took this picture of many of them did railroad work. And here we have on the top, the railroad map that the Chinese helped build. In fact, they built a major portion of this, the US Transcontinental Railroad. That's a very long one. And then in Canada, the Chinese were heavily involved in building the Canadian Pacific Railway. And so here we see that one was even much longer. And so we have Chinese workers that came west to earn money. Now we know they probably were not paid very well. However, whatever they were paid, they were extremely frugal and very hardworking. It was a custom that they always did. They always sent money back home. So it's just fascinating that they were able to even save anything to send back home to their family and village. But that was very common. Another side note with regard to this, when these early Chinese men bought a ticket to cross from China to go west, they actually bought a round trip ticket. And that round trip ticket ensured, because their intention was never to stay. It was always to go back home. And they would work and then go back home. However, we know that many died when they were here. And then many chose to stay. And so what happened if they bought this round trip ticket and then they died in this foreign country? Well, there is a practice of returning the bones back to their ancestral village. And so that's what the round trip ticket covered. They would be buried in the US or wherever in the West for 4 to 7 years. And then members from their Tong or the Benevolent Association would dig them up and put the bones in a box and ship them back to China, where they could be reburied in their ancestral village. And I just find that a very fascinating custom, but that was an interesting thing. Okay, let's keep going. Okay, laws in the United States. And there were similar laws in Australia and Canada, but this is specific to the US. So we have the Chinese Exclusion Act. So the Chinese actually were here before this Exclusion Act, but the people felt a need to restrict the immigration of the Chinese. There were so many Chinese here. So from 1882, for 10 years, the Chinese Exclusion Act was in place. And then it was renewed and repeated and actually extended until 1943, which is just remarkable and really quite sad that it happened this way. So what this did is it restricted the Chinese from becoming citizens in America from allowing more Chinese to come into America, even Chinese that were living in America who married and had children. Those children were not considered American citizens, even though they were born here. The Chinese, as part of their culture or desire, their home, ancestral home, was very important. And so many of the Chinese that were here in America during these years traveled back to China and then returned to the US. And so because of this, there are some absolutely wonderful immigration records that are available, very detailed, that can give you more information about your ancestor. Once the Chinese Exclusion Act was taken away, from that point forward, Chinese who were here in America could then apply to be citizens. However, initially, this act restricted the number of Chinese that could enter per year. And so the only ones that could qualify were those that were already related to somebody here. Again, more fascinating records were created as a result of this. Okay, so considering that many of the Chinese ancestors, or the Chinese that are here in the West, came from southern China, maybe Guangdong or Fujian province, you need to consider that they probably spoke Cantonese. And that's different than Mandarin. It has different pronunciations and accents. And it just sounds different to the ear. So you can look at the same character and it would be pronounced differently. Now, when our Chinese ancestors are recorded in American records, the census taker or whoever's writing the name down is going to write it how it sounds. Now, when we typically look at Chinese modern day, we probably think of Mandarin, and that's not the way that it sounded. And in fact, let me go here. Here I have a character. This character is Sha. And this is how the modern Romanization of that character is. It shows us how it's spelled with an accent mark, and this is in Pinyin. Well, there was a system prior to Pinyin. Pinyin has most recently been adopted all through mainland China, and this is the standard that is currently used. However, prior to Pinyin, there was a Wade-Giles form of Romanizing characters. And here's how it would be Romanized, Sha. And then you can go back and there are other methods that were used. So there was not really a standard until more recently. But if your ancestor spoke Cantonese or a dialect from one of those counties, which is very likely, the pronunciation of this character would sound very different. Here we have he, ha. So how do you know that that's the same thing? You don't always. Okay, so that is one of the issues that we have to deal with names in the West. And now going back to this one, when many Chinese that were here were merchants, and they were here for business, that was the way they could come and bring family over legally. And here we have a picture. I think this one is actually from San Francisco. But rather than use the whole name, they may have been called Chu, Chen, Li. Anyway, the is kind of a diminutive way to say a name, like we might say Betty or Kitty. It's just kind of a way to add to that name. So the is not the name, but you will find it written in census records regularly as part of their name. And then imagine if somebody asks a person's name, if they say it with the family name first, and then the given names, Well, a census taker may write it in the wrong order. So you have to have some strategies and consider the flexibility of the names when you look in the Western records. Okay, records that may list the family name, character, and the ancestral village. Tombstones. This is a great example. So here we have information on the person that died. Here we have the birth date and the death date. And here we actually have information about Taishan. This is a location in China where they are from. The other place that you can find is in the immigration records, the A files. Now the A files were recorded during that period that the Chinese Exclusion Act was in force. Every time a Chinese person tried to return to the US, they were detained and interviewed. And these are very rigorous interviews, very detailed and many pages long. So the kind of information that was collected, here were information on family members, where the family's from, birth dates, marriage dates, all kinds of information, and pages long. So look to see if there are immigration records available in your family. However, the A files you need to request through your NARA branch, your local NARA branch. And getting those, I would strongly encourage you to get those if you know that you have an ancestor that lived during that period and left the United States and then returned. Again, benevolent associations, if they were responsible for making sure that a deceased Chinese person, that their bones were returned, they must have had information about where each of these people were located or where their ancestral village was. Generally, these benevolent associations in general appear not to have these records available, but I suspect that it might be because they're not aware of the collection or the importance of the records. I think they created some wonderful records. If we could just find access to them, I think it could help with much of our research. Okay, other records in the United States that could help. We have ships passenger lists, the immigration records, the A files, business and city directories. The Chinese are very hardworking and very good at conducting business. And so they're often listed with a business in these city directories. You'll find them in the US federal census and state census records. Again, with variations on spellings. Military records, they are going to be in the military records. If they're living here during draft registration, they'll be listed on the draft registration records with a birth date and a birthplace. Maybe they served in the military. Maybe you actually have some military service pictures or papers within your family files. They'll be mentioned in vital records, which include birth, marriage, and death. Social Security death index, if they're here at the correct time frame. Cemetery and funeral home records. Okay, so I want to show you some Chinese specific collections that are in the United States that are available online. So I'm going to start a family search, and then I'm also going to show you from Ancestry. So Family Search is a free website that contains many digital images and indexes. It also contains a tree. You can create a free account and log in, and this is what I would suggest. They have a menu bar at the top. If you click on search, you'll see a drop-down menu here. And if there's time, we'll go ahead and investigate some of these. But at the search location, you see this big search field for name, birthplace, and so forth. I usually overlook that because I like to narrow down my searches. You'll see this map to the side, and this section where it says collection name. I actually typed Chinese in there. And, oh, okay, so what I did actually was this. I went to browse all collections rather than typing Chinese. Once it was here, I typed Chinese. And the collections that were listed immediately were some collections from California, Hawaii, and even Pennsylvania. So if your ancestor stopped in Hawaii or arrived through San Francisco or San Diego, here are some collections where you may find your ancestor. And then they also will be in these general collections. Those first collections were Chinese specific, but these collections, you may find them in as well. So these include passenger lists, immigration records, vital records, funeral home records, and naturalization records are especially important if it's after 1946. Okay, Ancestry is a subscription website, but they also have some Chinese specific collections. Again, I would suggest, looking at these categories of census, birth, and immigration. However, these are the ones that I identified through their catalog that are connected to the Chinese. So again, we have coming from the West, California, arrival case files, mortuary records, index to Chinese exclusion case files, Hawaii, certificates of identification, New York, North Dakota and Washington, Portland, Oregon, San Francisco, US Navy, Chinese immigration rolls, and then here we have, this one's a Canadian one. So they do have some collections specific to the Chinese. And again, Ancestry has general collections as well. Okay, I want to show you what some of these records look like with Chinese names. And again, they're going to be Romanized, so without characters. So you're going to have to be able to, you're going to have to at some point find the characters. So here we have a passenger list of Chinese seamen arriving at the port of San Diego. And here we have Chan Men, Huang Sam, Li Hui, and it gives us the age and their occupation. Here's another. This is a list or manifest of aliens employed on the vessel as members of the crew. Mit Chi Fo, he's a chief waiter. We have his age and where he's from, his height and weight. Again, this one is all Chinese passengers. Zheng Jiao Po, and the city or village. This is going to be helpful. The date of departure, the year of birth, port of entry, height. Here we have some immigration files. Oh, this one isn't a very good picture. Sorry about that. Statement of Chinese labor. Here, the blue ones are often the A files, and they're pages and pages long of very detailed interviews. Here we have a city directory listing the businesses as the business directory. Here we have Chen Feng H. He's a physician. Chinese medicine, traditional Chinese medicine. That was actually an apothecary or an herbal pharmacy or store. Those are the businesses often that they participated in. Here's another one. Here we have Chung Fat Hui Fu. He's an employee at Hickman Field, and there's the address. Here's an herb dealer, Chung Julia, and there's the address, the street address. Here we have a census. When you are looking at census records, make sure to look at the citizenship. However, with regard to the Chinese, they were not allowed to become citizens until 1946. So for the census records that we have available, the census years, they will never be shown as being a citizen. However, let's look at this here. We have Choi Guang, who is an employee. It tells us his date of birth, March 1857. He's 43, he's married, and number of years married, 4. born in China. It says he arrived in the US in 1882. Number of years in the United States, 18. And the AL stands for his citizenship status, which at this point is an alien because he was not allowed to become a citizen. His occupation is salesman. Here's again the 1920 census. Kokbok is a border, he's 65, tells us the year when he arrived, and he's an alien, again, Chinese, China. 1940, again, we can go through and find, here we have one born in China, or in Hawaii and below China. So use these records, state census records. This one is actually state census record for Illinois in the year 1865. And these records may also include anybody that was here. This is what this one looked like. This is more of tally mark of the ages of the people within the home. Yeah, the males, the females, and then other information over here. Military discharge records. Here we have for a Wang Harry. And again, giving us some good information. Military draft registration. This is a handwritten one. Yi Chen. And where his place of residence. It tells us his date of birth and his place of birth. Here's a vital record, and this one is for Pui Yun Lim, who went by George, and it tells us the name of the wife, Chung Oi Lim, and gives a date of birth, birthplace, occupation, and parents' names. This is very helpful. Another vital record, Yong Li, birthplace China, again, names of father, mother looks like Jane. A marriage license, Harry Lee in Chicago. I'm going to go through these a little quicker, so I'm running out of time. Here's a register of marriage, Louise Lee, and it tells occupation and who he's marrying. Social Security Death Index, Tan Lee Jung, born in Hawaii, or actually this isn't born in Hawaii. This says that this was, the Social Security card was received in Hawaii. Date of birth, date of death. There's another one, Chung Kai Wong. Funeral home records, and I know this is kind of faded, but here we have on April 11th, 1872, Sin Lok, 25 years from China, and then the location of the burial. Here we have tombstones with information about the family. He's from Guangdong, and this one also is from Guangdong on high. But it gives birth information, and with a couple of keyword characters, you can decipher this. This was born in 1935, the 7th month, the 4th day. And then the spouse would be over here. We only have the birth date. Oh, this is the death date. So this is the birth date, and this is the death date of this person. Citizenship and naturalization records, these are very detailed. So after 1946, you should be able to find the village listed. And family relations, here we have Fu Lam Shi, and she is applying for citizenship, declaring her intention. We have the name of the spouse. If there were children, they would be listed. A petition, this is the second papers, is Guangdong Toishan. So this is Guangdong, Kaiping Toisan. Another petition, again, if you can get these records, they will give you the information you need to get the village. Okay, what's next? Well, let's say that you want a Jiāpǔ that looks like one of these, or You have one. Where do you go from there? There are some resources, and let me show you what some of these are that may be able to help you. The first one I would recommend is downloading Pleco onto your phone. There is a free version and there's a paid version, and I can do everything I need to with my free version. It allows me to write characters or take a picture of a character, and then it helps me determine the meaning. Specific to Illinois, I wanted to show you about benevolent associations. So here we have a Chinese Consolidated Benevolent Association of Chicago, and here's their website. They have information in Chinese and English, but I would suggest you take a look around. They may be able to direct you to some resources. Members, here we have some other organizations that are subgroups of this larger group of Chicago. And here we have actually the location of other benevolent associations, not just in Chicago. This one's in San Francisco, this one's in New York, and here we have others in other locations. So considering where your ancestors came from, maybe your ancestors are associated with one of these that are still in existence. I strongly encourage you to look at the resources and join the Chinese Family History Group of Southern California. They have regular webinars and resources on Chinese family history research. One of the resources, and in fact, now I'm thinking, I think they might even have a 4th edition, but they have a new one that's a great resource. It's on CD. It gives you some helps and some reminders of what to look for. Here we see conversions of Chinese dates to Western, calendar, Chinese family associations, research collections, preserving your family information, how to engage children and teens, and getting access to records. So I think it's well worth the $38 for this CD. It gives you some great resources. Another group that I would suggest that you look into is the Bay Area Chinese Genealogy Group. This is a smaller organization. Again, all these organizations are run by volunteers, but they also have webinars and resources, but they focus mostly on the Bay Area, which would be San Francisco area. So if you have ancestors from there, it would be of value for you to get connected with that group. Here we have the Chinese Historical Society of America. Again, another great organization to be involved with and connected with. They always have things happening. And even if you're not near where they're located, they have virtual programs. And they focus more on, at least what I've seen, more on Chinese in the community and contemporary now, what's going on in the community, the Chinese community. And then this last resource, I would encourage you to get. A friend of mine wrote this book, Linda Yip, and she's a Canadian Chinese, I guess it would be Chinese Canadian, and she's very knowledgeable. And one of the things I really like about this book is it's an electronic book. It helps you understand some of the different naming conventions that may help you find the records here in the West that can then help you get back to China. Okay, so I've talked about a lot of things, and maybe I didn't talk about everything, but I'm at a point now where I can take some questions if you have any. Should I stop sharing my screen here?